Thank you. Good afternoon. How many of you are being transformed right now, today? You're feeling the transformation happen. All right. And everyone isn't always either in the process of being transformed or you're getting ready to become transformed soon. How about harmony? How many of you are becoming in harmony with the social world all around you? And that's a tough one. It's like, well, what does he mean by harmony? Well, let's talk about what we mean by harmonization. What does it have to do with heroism? We begin with a screenshot of Dr. Zimbardo giving his 2008 TED Talk. It's received nearly 5 million views. It's becoming as iconic as his famous prison study, this TED Talk. And you'll notice, if you look at what's behind him on the screen, he's got M.C. Escher's famous drawing called Angels and Devils. And so what he's discussing is the Lucifer effect, which occurs when people cross the line between good and evil and take part in an evil action. And this, of course, is the Lucifer effect, and it represents how a villain undergoes a transformation of human character. So villainy does involve a transformation, but then so does heroism. Joseph Campbell, who wrote the book on Heroes in 1949, talked about heroism involving a transformation of human consciousness. And so we see transformation occur toward the dark side and toward the side of light. And of course, bystanders don't transform at all. They lack any kind of transformation. But this is the transformation we're all seeking, the good transformation. So we're going to talk today about sociocentricity and egocentricity being sort of a yin and a yang. Two competing, yet dynamic, ever-shifting, harmonizing, yet conflicting, and befuddling forces. And how do we reconcile tendencies towards sociocentricity, which is putting the collective ahead of our own self-interest, versus selfish interest, egocentricity? How do we do this balancing act? How do we find that harmony? Because even if we are heroes, we still have to have lunch. We have to be selfish to some degree. And if we're always selfish, then we're not going to be a hero and we're going to be narcissists and we're not doing the world any good. So how do we find that balance? So how do we resolve? So resolving these energies requires a creative tension, a tension that we have to make decisions about and resolve throughout our entire lifespans. Resolving these two energies achieves that harmony between oneself and society. And resolving these energies is an important part of mature development. Let's talk about that. Joseph Campbell, I'm quoting him a lot because he's one of my intellectual heroes, talked about the purpose of hero stories. Hero mythology's purpose is to help you harmonize your life with the life of society. He's also known for this phrase, follow your bliss. And he described following your bliss as doing what you must do to be yourself and recovering that unrealized, unutilized potential in yourself. Now, these sound kind of selfish, don't they? And Campbell always lamented people's selfish interpretation of follow your bliss. But what he really meant is that you find out who you are, you find out what your gifts are to give back to society. So it's imagine finding who you are, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, building on your strengths, and then giving those gifts to society. That's follow your bliss. And so yin and yang, sociocentricity and egocentricity, you can think of the yin being kind of the softer, gentler side of human nature. It's very communal and nourishing. It's sociocentric. It's collective-oriented. It's heroic. The yang is more active, more aggressive. It's commanding, it's agentic, it's egocentric, it's selfish. It's not heroic. Now, this is an oversimplification because some acts of heroism require action. They require powerful leadership and force. So there's actually a yin and a yang to sociocentricity and a yin and a yang to egocentricity. There's some good and bad aspects to each, and again, that's finding that balance through a creative tension. Joseph Campbell talked about how the two halves of life is different. The first half of life, as you pass from the first to the second half of life, You're undergoing a fundamental psychological transformation that we all have to go through as we age. The transformation is finding that balance, again, between egocentricity and sociocentricity. And he called it a death and a resurrection. And psychologists actually, and spiritual gurus talk about in the first half of your life, when you're trying to find out who you are, you're trying to create an identity, that first half of life has to die eventually, so you can be born into the heroic second half of life. Carl Jung was one of the first people to differentiate between the first half of life concerns and second half of life concerns. One of my favorite quotes that Jung has is that what is a normal goal to a young person becomes a neurotic hindrance at old age. So a normal person is trying to create an identity for him or herself and get a job and establish an identity and a career and a family. But if an 80-year-old man all cared about a job and career, starting a family, that would be a neurotic hindrance to an older person. So we can talk about this as being two stages of life. First stage of life is the more yang stage. It's the more egocentric stage where you're trying to survive. That first half of life is just a survival. You're just trying to find out who you are and create an identity, get a job, have a family. You invest in your first half of life. You're investing blood and sweat and years and tears and eggs and sperm and all this stuff into becoming who you are. But then the second half of life comes around and you realize that all those energies devoted toward your selfish pursuits, they don't solve life's most fundamental questions. They don't solve life's most pressing problems. So the second half of life, you've got social consciousness, the birth of social consciousness, the idea of becoming an elder and giving back and loving and accepting everyone. We can talk about crisis being the triggering event, the pivotal event between the first and second half of life. We all have to fall, we all have to fail in some sense to go from egocentricity to sociocentricity. And crisis is a central aspect of many of psychology's theories of lifespan development. Crisis is at the heart of Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. In fact, there's two different types of crises. There's the initial crisis that sends you onto the hero's journey. In The Wizard of Oz, what sends Dorothy on her journey? The tornado crisis. Outside forces are often sending us onto the first journey. And then during that journey, we see a second crisis where the hero is in the belly of the whale. What happens to Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz while she's in Oz that is her low point, where it looks like all is lost? It's when she's been captured by the witch, the wicked witch. So I want to give an example of William James. William James is a famous philosopher and one of the first psychologists who underwent a crisis as a young man. When he was in his 20s, William James was lost. He was depressed. He called it being torn to pieces, and he used the German word Zerrissenheit to describe his feelings of malaise. Basically, he felt like nothing he did mattered. Nothing he did made a difference to William James. He was just lost because nothing mattered. So he decided, oh, here we go. Wait a minute, did I go pass through this? Here it is. He decided to do an experiment on himself. So he acted as if, for the next year, he spent a year of his life acting as if everything he did mattered. For an entire year, he said, all right, I feel like nothing I do matters. For the next year, I'm going to act as if everything matters. And that transformed his life, and he became transformed with a wide and deep sympathy for the vast pluralities of lives which exist in the modern world. He became transformed. Crisis transformed him, and it was a matter of acting as if everything mattered, that he could make a difference. So it is a mindset to a large degree. Joseph Campbell talked about crisis and the hero's journey as a heroic transformation of consciousness. Buddhism and 12-step programs of recovery call this an awakening. In my research, I've identified at least 3 ways that people transform as they go from the first half of life to the second half of life. And by the way, when I talk about first to second half of life, I don't necessarily mean chronologically. Some people arrive at the second half of life when they're still very young. But the 3 ways that people transform that you can talk about, we've already talked about one of them, is the shift from egocentricity to sociocentricity. The second kind of transformation is that shift from dependency to autonomy, which is the idea that you go from following the crowd and doing what everyone else does to being the rebel. to being someone who dares to be different, who dares to do the right thing even when everyone else is doing the wrong thing. So the drive to autonomy is important. And then you have this shift from stagnation to growth. Most people are too lazy to really go out and go on the hero's journey. They have to be sent, like Dorothy, to discover their true self, to experience the death of the false self, the birth of the new self. So here we have the three ways people transform: to sociocentricity, to autonomy, independent thinking, to growth, being growth-oriented. Arthur Schopenhauer has this great quote from an essay he wrote in 1840. In 1840, he said that the transformed individual has moved from the lesser knowledge of himself as separate from others, quote, to the great truer truth that we are all one in the ground of our being. I just love that. We're all one in the ground of our being. And the transformed individual is selfless and boundless without ego. And that transformation, that we are all one, can occur across the lifespan, slowly, gradually, it can occur to us, or it can occur in a split second. If you find yourself in an emergency situation and you risk your life to help someone in a crisis, you can undergo this transformation of thinking that we're all one in the ground of our being, just like that. Rumi talks about everything you want, you already are. I love that quote. Everything you want, you already are. And that's consistent with research that shows that we may be born as heroes. There's heroic qualities in our hard wiring. There's research showing there may be an empathy gene. This is an article talking about a possible leadership gene. This article about young infants suggests that newborn babies prefer morality over immorality. Resilience may be inherited. There may be an altruism gene. Compassion may be our first instinct. All of these studies are coming out just in the last few years suggesting that heroism is part of our inherent nature, but we don't know it. I love this quote from Olivia F. Fidel, the idea that heroism predates us. She had this on her slide. I didn't even know this, but if you recognize this quote from her slide, heroism predates us. It is our birth mother, it's our guide map, it's our guardian. That's a wonderful quote suggesting that it is in the essence of our being. This is the website for this conference. Notice it says heroes are not born, heroes are trained. And I might politely disagree slightly with the idea that heroes are not born, because I think there are heroic qualities that we are born with, and that we are born with the building blocks of heroism, but these heroic aspects are suppressed by our regressive culture. In Western society, the heroism that is inherent in us is drummed out of us. We're told, oh, it's all about the pursuit of money. Grow up to be successful. Success being defined as wealth, as accumulating a house, of getting that nice car, of getting a partner. That's one thing that just suppresses our inborn heroic qualities. The other aspect is, we've talked about it, that there is a life stage developmental process, sequence of actions that have to unfold naturally. Now we can facilitate the process with our actions. I'll talk about that. Now your challenge, your call, your biological and psychological destiny is to undergo that heroic transformation and to be aware of it. Just knowing now that you're aware of it will help the processes unfold more easily. You can build your heroic qualities like empathy and resilience and courage. You can learn from heroic mentors. Who you hang out with, who you seek help from makes a big difference in your life. So choose your mentors well. Allow for heroic developmental progress. So know that these stages occur naturally and be ready for them. Help others transform. This is important. If you help others transform, then you transform yourself. Become a hero in training. Make a difference in someone's life every day. And I mean even in the smallest way, whether it's just smiling. How many of you have been lifted by just a smile from a complete stranger as you pass on the street? That little thing can have a ripple effect. I know it's had a ripple effect on my day. I could be having a crappy day. And if some complete stranger smiles at me, it's like, whoa. And suddenly I'm feeling a little bit better. And that's the small way you can make a difference. Of course, there are much more bigger, heroic ways you can make a difference. And I think that you know what I'm talking about. that this is what we're called to do. Don't get in the way of what we're naturally born to do. And ironically, one of the best ways to transform yourself is to help others. So look at this research that's coming out now that you're probably aware of. Random acts of kindness changes your brain chemistry with the release of chemicals, with changes, alterations in your neuroanatomical structures. Kindness changes your neurophysiology. Practicing kindness changes your brain. Compassion changes the brain. And so here's the great irony of it all, is that Joseph Campbell talked about personal transformation as a way to become a hero. But look how becoming a hero can also bring about a transformation. So transformation both causes heroism, and heroism itself can bring about a transformation. It works both ways. And that's what happened to William James. William James, who went through Zerrissenheit, he acted as if what he did made a difference. And just by acting as if you can make a difference will produce a difference in yourself and also in the world around you. Joseph Campbell will end here with this quote. This is a great quote. Your hero's journey is the truth of your life. As Schopenhauer said, it's the truer truth. This is the truth of your life. So allow heroism to transform and harmonize you. Thank you very much.
The Hero Roundtables are the global events that ask the question, what is a hero? You've just seen one hero talk. To find more and join the conversation, visit our website or social media.